Alright. Good afternoon, television fans. Big Al here on this Tuesday, May 12th, 2026. And welcome to episode number 34 of Television Station History. Today we'll be talking about WFLD. From its humble beginnings under the ownership of Field Communications to the present day as a Fox-owned and operated television station. So let's dive into the history of WFLD. Info is courtesy of Wikipedia. WFLD Channel 32 is a television station in Chicago, Illinois. It is owned and operated by the Fox Network through its Fox Television Stations division, alongside WPWR-TV Channel 50, which is an independent station with a secondary affiliation with My Network TV. The two stations share studios on North Michigan Avenue in the Chicago Loop, and transmitter facilities at the Sears Tower. Alright, here are the specs for WFLD Chicago. The station broadcasts on Virtual Channel 32. Their digital signal, seen on RF Digital Channel 24, is shared with sister station WPWR-TV. General on-air brands are Fox 32 Chicago or Fox Chicago, and their news brand is Fox 32 News. We'll talk about the sub-channels towards the end. The owner is Fox Television Stations LLC. Its sister station is the aforementioned WPWR-TV Channel 50. WFLD signed on the air on January 4th, 1966 as an independent station. Then it was one of the charter affiliates of the Fox Television Network when that network aired in 1986. They also had a secondary affiliation with CBS from 1967 to 1970. The station previously aired on UHF Analog Channel 32 from 1966 to 2009, while their digital signal previously aired on RF Digital Channel 31 from 1999 to 2019. Call sign meaning is Field Enterprises, the station's founding owner. Licensing authority is the Federal Communications Commission. Their facility ID number is 22211. They currently broadcast under a special temporary authority at 435.5 kilowatts and currently have a construction permit to broadcast at 1,000 kilowatts. Under their STA, their transmitter at the Sears Tower is 509.5 meters or 1,672 feet above sea level. With their construction permit, their tower would be 520 meters and 1,706 feet above sea level. Their website is www.fox32chicago.com. Now to the history, starting off as an independent station from 1966 to 1986 under Field Communications ownership. WFLD first signed on the air on January 4th, 1966 as an independent station. It was founded by a joint venture of the parties that each competed individually for the license and construction permit to operate on UHF Channel 32. Field Enterprises, owned by heirs of the Marshall Field's department store chain and publishers of the Chicago Sun-Times and the Chicago Daily News, was the station's majority partner with a 50% interest. It was responsible for managing WFLD's day-to-day operations. They were led by veteran broadcasting executive Sterling C. Quinlan, also known as Red. The station originally operated from studio facilities located within the Marina City complex on State Street. Channel 32 was christened as the Station of Tomorrow by an April 1966 Sun-Times article because of its innovative technical developments in broadcasting its signal. It also broadcast news programming from the Chicago Sun-Times and Daily News newsroom. From the fall of 1967 to the summer of 1970, WFLD aired the final hour of CBS's Saturday daytime schedule from noon to 1 p.m. in lieu of the network's owned and operated station WBBM-TV Channel 2. In March 1969, Field entered into an agreement to sell WFLD to New York City-based Metro Media for $10 million. At the time, the Field interests were concerned about running afoul of the Federal Communications Commission's recent scrutiny of commonly owned multiple media outlets within the same market. The deal ultimately fell through nearly 1 year later in February 1970. Following the collapse, the Metro Media purchase attempt, Field instead purchased the 50% share of WFLD that was held by its minority partners. WFLD was noteworthy for being the longtime home of the local B-movie program Svengoolie. There were two versions of the showcase. The original incarnation of the series began on the station on September 18, 1970, under the title Screaming Yellow Theater, with local disc jockey Jerry G. Bishop, doing scary voices and later wearing a long green wig while portraying the character. Oh, I'm reading the Wikipedia page at WFLD. Welcome in, Jordan. Bishop became such a hit with viewers that the show was popularly called Svengoolie after his character, although the title of the program did not change, and this version lasted until late in the summer of 1973. The second version premiered on June 16, 1979, with Rich Cos as son of Svengoolie, and ran on Channel 32 until January 25, 1986. The show was revived on WCIU-TV Channel 26 when it became an English-language independent station in December 1994, and has aired there locally ever since, and began to be broadcast nationally on MeTV in April 2011. WFLD also showed two more horror movie showcases, Monstrous Movie and Killer Theater, that both aired before Svengoolie. Field Communications sold controlling interest in WFLD to Kaiser Broadcasting. In May 1972, when the deal was completed, and that was in May of 1972, I should say. When the deal was completed in July 1973, the two companies' new partnership resulted in WFLD joining Kaiser's stable of UHF independent stations, including KBHK-TV in San Francisco, WKBG-TV in Boston, WKBS-TV in Philadelphia, WKBF-TV in Cleveland, and WKBD-TV in Detroit. In June 1977, Kaiser ended the partnership when it sold its share of the stations back to Field Enterprises. In addition to carrying the traditional fare of sitcoms, drama series, children's programs, and first-run syndicated programs, the station also aired movies, initially European releases that were dubbed into English, and local public affairs programming during this period. To counter-program against its more established VHF rivals, Channel 32 offered older cartoons, older off-network sitcoms, documentaries, drama series, westerns, and live sporting events, although it easily trailed its biggest competitor, WGN-TV Channel 9, in the ratings among Chicago's independent stations. The station broadcast daily from 10 a.m. to about 1 a.m. during the 1970s, except from September to December, when the station signed on at 7 a.m. Beginning in 1978, Field, or rather WFLD, signed on before 6 a.m., and in 1975, the station acquired the local syndication rights to the Brady Bunch and the Partridge Family. And that happened 2 years later in 1977 when the station won the rights to a stronger slate of cartoons such as Woody Woodpecker, Tom and Jerry, Popeye, and the Flintstones. Channel 32 strengthened its syndicated programming slate in 1979 when it acquired the local syndication rights to MASH, All in the Family, Happy Days, and What's Happening. The station also acquired the rights to I Love Lucy that year, and later added Battlestar Galactica, Buck Rogers in the 25th Century, The $6 Million Man, Wonder Woman, and Star Trek in 1982. WFLD began to beat WGN-TV in ratings as a result of its stronger programming acquisitions, and the two stations continued to go head-to-head throughout the 1980s. WFLD scored no big-ticket program acquisitions in 1980 or 1981. However, in 1982, the station won the local syndication rights to popular series such as Three's Company, Taxi, and Mork and Mindy. Beginning in 1981, WFLD began overnight broadcasts of an in-vision teletext service, Night Owl, created by and intended to promote the key fax service that was at the time being transmitted through WFLD's Virtual Blanking Interval, or VBI. Keyfax was partially owned by Field Enterprises. Broadcasts of the service ceased after some time as Keyfax attempted to reposition itself as a two-way information service akin to Prestel or Viewtron. The service was discontinued completely by the end of 1986. Next up, the sale to Metro Media. In 1982, Field Enterprises began a sale of its 5 television stations on an individual basis, a process which continued into the following year due to disagreements between brothers Marshall Field V and Frederick Ted Field on how to operate the company, which strained their working relationship. Incidentally, the year prior in 1981, the Field brothers sought a prospective buyer for WFLD if the company would be put up for sale. While WFLD was the leading independent television station in Chicago at the time, most of the companies that were interested in buying WFLD were only willing to pay about half the amount that Field wanted for the station, at least $100 million, compared to the approximately $50 million that the most expensive UHF stations went for. In addition, most of the prospective companies were concerned that Tribune Broadcasting owned WGN-TV could eventually overtake WFLD again in the local ratings. By mere coincidence, given Field's previous aborted attempt to sell Channel 32 to that group, the one company that showed interest in WFLD was Metro Media, owner of WNEW-TV in New York City, which led the independent television stations in that market and beat Tribune on WPIX in the ratings there. Metro Media was ripe to compete against WGN, based on the group's success in competing against WPIX in the New York market. In Chicago, Metro Media was given the right of first refusal to purchase WFLD. When Field began selling its stations, the company sold WFLD to Metro Media again, this time in a successfully completed deal for slightly over $100 million, a record price for a UHF station at that time. WFLD was the first of the stations that Field Communications sold when it began the liquidation process in September 1982, with the final station to be sold being Detroit's WKBD-TV in January 1984 and completing the deal for WFLD in March 1983. As a condition, Metro Media was forced by the FCC to divest radio station WMET 95.5, which is now iHeartRadio-owned rock station WCHI-FM. So Metro Media sold that station to Doubleday Broadcasting. WFLD's program slate changed slightly, but the station's on-air graphics and branding were abruptly changed to reflect the new ownership, with the station adopting Metro Media 32 as its on-air brand, using a similar branding scheme that was used at new sister station WNEW-TV in New York. Still, the old Field-era logos were used on air by accident on some occasions through the summer of 1983. Metro Media added several first-run syndicated programs that were not previously carried in the Chicago market, as the market had only two commercial independent stations at the time, as WSNS-TV Channel 44, which is now a Telemundo owned and operated station, became a full-time affiliate of the On-TV subscription service the previous year. On to the station schedule, particularly in prime time, like the Merv Griffin Show, which WFLD previously carried a few years prior, but subsequently moved to Channel 44, where it ran until that station became a full-time on-TV outlet. WFLD remained the top-rated independent station in Chicago throughout Metro Media's ownership of the station. Now, the history of WFLD as a Fox-owned and operated station from 1986 to the present. In May 1985, Metro Media reached an agreement to sell WFLD-TV and its 5 sister independent stations, WNEW-TV in New York, KTTV in Los Angeles, WTTG in Washington, D.C., KRLD-TV in Dallas-Fort Worth, and KRIV in Houston to News Corporation, owned by Australian newspaper magnate Rupert Murdoch, for $2.55 billion. ABC affiliate WCVB-TV in Boston, the company's only network-affiliated station, was originally to be sold as well through the deal, but upon exercising a right of first refusal clause related to Metro Media's 1982 purchase of that station, it was spun off to Hearst Corporation's television and radio subsidiary Hearst Broadcasting for $450 million in a separate concurrent deal. That October, News Corporation, which had purchased a 50% interest in 20th Century Fox corporate parent TCF Holdings for $250 million in March of 1985, announced its intentions to create a fourth television network that would use the resources of 20th Century Fox Television to both produce and distribute programming, intending to compete with ABC, CBS, and NBC. The company formally announced the launch of the new network, the Fox Broadcasting Company, on May 7, 1986. Oh, we gotta get rid of this guy. Yeah, we can't be dropping them slurs in the comments, folks. All right. Before that little interruption, the company formally announced the launch of the new network, the Fox Broadcasting Company, on May 7th, 1986, with the former Metro media station serving as its nuclei. The purchase of the Metro media stations was approved by the FCC and finalized on March 6, 1986, with News Corporation creating a new broadcasting unit, the Fox television stations, to oversee the 6 television stations in April 1986. Consequently, through the purchase, WFLD became one of the charter owned and operated stations of the Fox Broadcasting Company when the network launched 7 months later on October 9th. Following the sale to Fox, the station, which began branding on air as Fox 32, continued to compete aggressively in the market, acquiring off-network syndicated programs such as Family Ties and The Cosby Show for its schedule. The station also migrated its operations into its current facility at 205 North Michigan Avenue in 1986, while also expanding its news presence with the launch of its news department in August 1987. The station continued to carry its cartoon block on weekday afternoons and top-rated off-network sitcoms in the evening hours. It also added more first-run talk and court shows. Although it was now part of a network, as was the case with other Fox stations during the network's early years, Channel 32, for all intents and purposes, continued to be programmed as a de facto independent station, as Fox's initial programming consisted solely of a late-night talk show, The Late Show starring Joan Rivers. Even when Fox launched its primetime lineup in April 1987, the network only aired programs during that day part on Saturday and Sundays early on. Fox gradually debuted additional nights of programming over the next 6 years until it adopted a 7-night-a-week schedule in September 1993. Until Fox began airing programming on a nightly basis, WFLD aired a movie at 7 p.m., initially at 8 p.m. until 1988, on nights when network programs did not air. The afternoon and Saturday morning animation blocks were replaced by the network-supplied Fox Children's Network block, later known as Fox Kids. In September 1990. During the mid-1990s, WFLD continued to strengthen its programming schedule with acquisitions such as The Simpsons, Home Improvement, and Seinfeld. Home Improvement would later move to rival station WGN-TV in September 2001, while Seinfeld would move to sister station WPWR Channel 50 and then to WCIU-TV Channel 26. In 1997, after several years of being known on the air as Fox 32, although it began to visually de-emphasize references to Channel 32 on air in 1993, the station changed its on-air brand to Fox Chicago. This was due to the perceived embarrassment of being on a UHF analog channel in the third largest market in the United States, especially considering that the WB was carried on VHF station WGN-TV Channel 9. For much of this period, WFLD was the only Fox-owned and operated station that did not use the conventional Fox channel number brand standardization, even though most Chicagoans still referred to WFLD as Fox 32 or Channel 32. WFLD's sister station, WTXF-TV in Philadelphia, utilized this same practice for 9 years after Fox purchased that station from the Paramount Stations Group in 1994. In June 2002, Fox television stations purchased UPN affiliate WPWR-TV from NewsWeb Corporation for $450 million, and the deal created a duopoly with WFLD when it was finalized on August 21st of that year, with WPWR's operations subsequently being integrated into WFLD's facilities in downtown Chicago. When Fox ended the weekday editions of the Fox Kids block in January 2002, WFLD added more first-run reality and talk shows to its lineup. In January 2003, WFLD dropped the Fox Saturday morning cartoon block, by then outsourced by Fox to producer 4Kids Entertainment, and subsequently rebranded as 4Kids TV, which was moved to Channel 50, where that station aired the Saturday block in the same time slot until Fox continued 4Kids TV on December 27, 2008. WFLD was one of the first, or rather WFLD was the first of Fox's 6 originally owned and operated stations that were owned prior to its purchase of the New World Communications stations to drop Fox's Saturday children's programming, and one of the few non-New World Fox owned and operated stations, the other being sister station KMSP TV in Minneapolis, that currently does not run the weekend Marketplace infomercial block, which airs on Channel 50 instead. In September 2006, WFLD relaunched its website, migrating it to the MyFox platform that was also rolled out to the other Fox-owned stations. The MyFox sites were refreshed in 2009 using a new platform developed by Fox and Lynn Media, spun off as InPlay, which Fox owned an equity interest in. In April 2012, World Now began to operate the websites for all Fox's owned and operated stations. On November 12, 2012, the station dropped the Fox Chicago brand after 15 years and began branding as Fox 32, full-time for the first time since 1993. On December 14, 2017, the Walt Disney Company, owner of ABC's owned and operated station WLS-TV Channel 7, announced its intent to buy WFLD's parent company 21st Century Fox for $66.1 billion. The sale, which closed on March 20, 2019, excluded WFLD and sister station WPWR-TV, as well as the Fox Network, the My Network TV programming service, Fox News, Fox Sports 1, the Big Ten Network, and the Fox Television Stations unit, which were all transferred to a new company called Fox Corporation. Alright, now to programming. We'll start with sports programming. WFLD acquired the rights to broadcast Major League Baseball games from the Chicago White Sox in 1968, assuming the contract from WGN-TV. Under the initial deal, WFLD carried White Sox games until 1972, when the team returned to WGN through a joint arrangement with WSNS-TV that lasted through the 1980 season and exclusively during the 1981 season. Channel 32 reassumed Sox games rights in 1982, carrying most of the team's non-cable games. In October 1988, the station filed a lawsuit against the White Sox to terminate its television contract with the team, which was set to last through 1991, accusing team owners Jerry Reinsdorf and Eddie Einhorn of gutting and strip mining, the team of salary investment, player quality, and fan goodwill, which resulted in a decline in viewership for the games and profit losses for the station on the contract. WFLD's profits from the telecast slid from $1.5 million from a $1.5 million profit in 1985 to a loss of $1.4 million in 1988, resulting in the rights fees costing 4 times more than the accrued revenue. Ratings during that 3-year period also dropped from a 5.1 share in 1985 to a 1.7 in August 1988, as well as breached advertising agreements with the Chicagoland Dodge Dealers Consortium. Following an out-of-court settlement between WFLD station management and the White Sox on September 14, 1989, the White Sox announced that it would move its local television broadcast back to Channel 9 beginning with the 1990 season. Since the network established its sports division in 1994, most sports events carried on Channel 32 have been provided through Fox Sports. Through Fox's coverage of Major League Baseball, WFLD has televised 2 of the 3 World Series with Chicago teams, which have occurred in the television era, with the White Sox in 2005 and the Cubs in 2016, both ending in series victories for each team and ending lengthy droughts predating even the golden age of radio. From 1985 to 1989, WFLD also aired NBA games featuring the Chicago Bulls. Through the same agreement that resulted in that station obtaining the White Sox rights, WGN-TV acquired broadcast rights to the Bulls as Reinsdorf owns both franchises. Those not familiar with Jerry Reinsdorf, he is a Chicago area attorney and real estate investor. Through Fox's primary rights to the National Football Conference, or the NFC, the station has aired most Chicago Bears games since the network acquired partial television rights to the NFL in 1994. On April 22, 2008, the Bears announced a deal with WFLD to become its official broadcast partner. Consequently, in addition to already carrying most regular season and select preseason games through Fox, it began airing preseason games through the team's syndication service, as well as other Bears-related programming during the NFL season, including the pregame and postgame shows, Bears Game Day Live on Sunday mornings, and Bears Game Night Live, which follows the final word on Sunday nights. Other team-related programs were added through the deal, including WFLD-produced secondary pregame show Fox Kickoff Sunday, which debuted in 2010, not to be confused with the present Fox NFL Kickoff, which, due to Bears Game Day Live, airs on Channel 50 instead, and the feature interview program Inside the Bears, which debuted in 2013. On October 17, 2017, WFLD announced that it had renewed the Bears' rights through the 2022 season. And since 2018, WFLD has, through Fox, then through Amazon Prime Video, also aired any Bears games that are part of the Thursday Night Football package. Alright, now to the news operation. WFLD presently broadcasts 67.5 hours of locally produced newscasts each week, with 12 hours each weekday, 3.5 hours Saturdays, and 4 hours on Sundays. In regards to the number of hours devoted to locally produced news programming, it is the second highest news programming output of any station in Chicago, right behind WGN-TV, which runs 70.5 hours of newscasts each week. Unlike most Fox affiliates in large markets, Channel 32 does not seem to carry evening newscasts on weekends. Alright, now to the station's news department history. During much of its history under the ownership of Field Enterprises, WFLD's news programming consisted solely of 90-second news updates branded as Newscope, later renamed News Scene in 1979. That aired during the station's daytime and evening programming, plus a 10 p.m. edition of the program consisted to be 5 to 10 minute locally produced inserts that served as a lead out of the station's weeknight primetime movie presentations. During the overnight hours, the station also provided the Key Facts Night Owl teletext service, which provided news, weather, sports, and entertainment stories fed by computer systems at the Chicago Sun-Times. At the Chicago Sun-Times offices, with data sent over a telephone line from an editorial office in Elk Grove Village. After Night Owl was discontinued in 1982, WFLD began airing an hour-long simulcast of CNN headline news during the overnight hours, as well as in the early afternoon on weekdays. Newscope was canceled in 1982, shortly after Metro Media finalized its acquisition of the station. Metro Media canceled the Newscope updates at least in part because of plans for a full-fledged news department for the station. At the time, Metro Media was also launching news operations at their Dallas and Houston stations, as part of a news initiative centered around an hour-long hybrid national-local newscast. While the Dallas and Houston operations launched under Metro Media ownership, the planned news department for WFLD did not come to fruition, and neither did the planned national newscast. Following the announcement that it would move the station to a news studio facility on Michigan Avenue, Fox television stations created an in-house news department for WFLD. The station debuted its first long-form newscasts on August 3, 1987. With the premiere of half-hour newscasts at 7 p.m. touted as the news that doesn't get home before you do, and 11 p.m. which aired Monday through Friday evenings. This was followed by the addition of a half-hour 9 p.m. weekend edition on August 29th. Originally anchored by Chris Long and Robin Robinson Brantley, the latter of whom remained the station's lead anchor until November 2013. The two programs aired separately for a year until both newscasts were consolidated into a single half-hour program to compete with the 9 p.m. news on then independent station WGN-TV in November 1987, at which time the weekend editions were also canceled due to low ratings. The early newscast was moved back to 7 p.m. by the fall of 1988 and returned to 9 p.m. by the fall of 1989, in anticipation of Fox's expanding primetime schedule. In September 1990, WFLD announced plans to launch a 24-hour local cable news channel to have been named Chicago Cable News. In conjunction with former WLS-TV and WMAQ-TV weathercaster John Coleman, who was tapped to serve as the channel's general manager, and local cable provider Telecommunications Incorporated, which sold its Chicago area systems to Comcast in 1999 for a tentative launch in January 1991. Although Chicago Cable News would have shared some video footage with WFLD, the channel planned to employ anchors and reporters separate from those seen on Channel 32's newscast. For unknown reason, this concept never launched. Incidentally, WGN-TV eventually launched a similar cable channel, Chicagoland Television, or CLTV, in January 1993. In 1991, the station retitled its newscast from Fox 32 News to Fox News Chicago, though it was largely referenced verbally as simply Fox News in report introductions and end tags. WFLD's most consequential news hire came in April 1993, when it persuaded longtime Channel 2 anchor Walter Jacobson to take over as lead anchor of Channel 32's 9 p.m. news. He also began providing tape commentaries and hosted a viewer mail segment for Good Day Chicago during its first years. Jacobson remained a main co-anchor of the 9 p.m. news until 2004, when he was replaced by Mark Sapelsla. Jacobson stayed at Channel 32 as host of Fox Chicago Sunday and a commentator for the evening newscast until his retirement in 2006. He subsequently came out of retirement and returned to WBBM, where he would remain until 2012. Largely due to Jacobson's influence, WFLD's newscasts have somewhat less of a tabloid feel than other Fox stations. However, they are stylistically flashier than the Chicago market's other local television news programs. WFLD programmed news outside its established 9 p.m. time slot for the first time on June 28, 1993, when it premiered a weekday morning newscast entitled Good Day Chicago. First anchored by Marian Murciano, Daryl Denard, and David Rose, and formatted as a mix of news, commentary, and lifestyle features, the show originally aired for 3 hours from 6 to 9 a.m., replacing children's programming. In July 1999, WFLD launched a half-hour midday newscast at noon, while expanding its morning newscast, by that time titled Fox Thing in the Morning, to 4 hours starting at 5 a.m. On April 9, 2007, WFLD premiered a half-hour 10 p.m. newscast called The 10, anchored by David Navarro and former Channel 7 and Channel 2 anchor and reporter Lauren Cohn. The program, according to Robert Feeder's April 18, 2007 column in the Chicago Sun-Times, beat CBS-owned WBBM TV's 10 p.m. news on its second day on the air. Despite its early success against Channel 2, the 10 was overall never much of a factor in the ratings towards the end of its run. It fell to a distant fifth behind established late-night news counterparts WBBM Channel 2, WLS Channel 7, and WMAQ Channel 5, as well as Family Guy reruns on WGN-TV Channel 9. As a result, WFLD canceled the program, with its last broadcast airing on September 21, 2009. On January 12, 2009, WFLD and NBC-owned WMAQ-TV entered into a local news service agreement to share a news helicopter and pull video footage between the two stations. On May 10, 2009, WFLD became the last news-producing English-language station in Chicago to begin broadcasting its newscast in high definition. However, remote field footage continues to be broadcast in the 16:9 widescreen standard definition. On July 5th, 2016, WFLD launched an hour-long weekday-only newscast at 5 p.m., becoming the 15th Fox-owned station and the 5th television station in Chicago to air a late afternoon newscast. The program competes against half-hour early evening news programs on established counterparts, channels 2, 5, and 7, and the second hour of the evening news block on channel 9. On March 30th, 2017, WFLD announced that it would expand the length of Good Day Chicago to 6 hours, with the addition of a half hour to start the program at 4 a.m. Ironically, when the expansion took place on April 10th, WFLD became the third television station in Chicago to expand its morning newscast into that time period, following Channel 9, which began its expansion into the 4 a.m. hour in July 2011, and Channel 5, which launched a 4 a.m. newscast in August 2015. Ratings. Historically, WFLD has been one of Fox's weakest owned and operated stations, particularly in regards to its newscasts. In recent Nielsen rating sweep periods, WFLD has been mired in last place among the late evening 9 or 10 p.m. newscasts seen on the market's 5 English-language news-producing stations. As such, Chicago, prior to WGN's disaffiliation from that network in September 2016, that network being the CW, by the way, which was one of the few markets in the country where the Fox station actually trailed that market's CW-affiliated station in the local viewership ratings from sign-on to sign-off. This is primarily due to Channel 9's strong news department, local sports programming, and higher-rated syndicated programming, even though Channel 32 has a much stronger network lead-in. In the February 2011 sweeps period, WFLD's 9 p.m. newscast slid to a 2.3 rating share, down more than a full point from a 3.4 during the February 2010 sweeps period. This is despite the pairing of co-anchor team Bob Surratt and Robin Robinson, suggesting that the pairing of the anchors has not been able to improve ratings. By February 2015, the 9 p.m. newscast, by then anchored by Dawn Hasbrook and Jeff Herndon, had dropped to a 0.9 share, which is a decline from a 1.3 in May 2014, and that fell behind the 1.6 share accrued by Channel 9's 9 p.m. news. Notable current on-air staff includes Sylvia Perez, an anchor and general assignment manager, or rather anchor and general assignment reporter, and Roseanne Tellez, another anchor and general assignment reporter. Of course, Roseanne Tellez used to work at Channel 9 back in the day. Notable former on-air staff include Mike Bars, Jerry G. Bishop, Lauren Cohn, Jack Connetti, Anna Del Valentis, Maurice Dubois, John Duncanson, Amy Freeze, Tamron Hall, Jonathan Hoeing, Bill Johnson, Walter Jacobson, Jan Jeffcoat, John Kelly, Ty Copen, Rich Cos, Sarah Kustok, Rich Leventhal, Don Lemon, Nancy Liu, Corey McPherson, Brent Miller, Johnny Morris, Marianne Murciano, David Navarro, Anita Padilla, Michael Pomerantz, Robin Robinson, Richard Roper, Bob Surratt, Tammy Souza, Mark Sapolsa, Harry Volkman, Tom Waddle, Rafer Weigel, and Bruce Wolf. Now to technical information and the station's subchannels. Their digital signal is of course shared with sister station WPWR on RF Digital Channel 24. Hey, it's Stardust. How's it going? Alright, so main Fox programming is seen on channel 32.1 at 720p resolution high definition. The other subchannels are in 480i HD resolution, including movies on channel 32.2, the Game Show Network Buzzer on 32.3, the Comedy Central Multicast Network Roar on 32.4, and Fox Weather on 32.5. WFLD also broadcasts Dabble on behalf of another station, that being WBBM TV Channel 2.3, which is also 480i resolution HD. Its sister station only has one subchannel, and that's the main independent programming seen on WPWR TV Channel 50.1, with My Network TV programming seen on a secondary basis, and that station broadcasts in 720p HD. Analog to digital conversion. WFLD ended regular programming on its analog signal over UHF Channel 32 at 11:59 p.m. on June 12, 2009, the official date on which full-power television stations in the United States transitioned from analog to digital broadcast under federal mandate. The station's digital signal continued to broadcast on its pre-transition UHF Channel 31 using virtual Channel 32. WFLD was the only television station in Chicago that participated in the analog nightlight program until its analog transmitter atop the John Hancock Center was shut down permanently on June 26, 2009. The station's transmitter was upgraded to operate at a radiated power of 1 megawatt. The maximum amount of power legally allowed for a broadcast television transmitter by the FCC, and that was in early 2009. And to wrap things up, on April 13, 2017, it was revealed that the over-the-air spectrum of sister station WPWR-TV was sold in the FCC's spectrum reallocation auction for $160.7 million. WPWR-TV began sharing broadcast spectrum with WFLD effective June 11, 2018, and again, both stations broadcast their digital signal on RF Digital Channel 24. So there it is, the history of WFLD. From its earlier days under the ownership of Field Communications, Kaiser Broadcasting, and Metro Media, to today as a Fox-owned and operated station, and one of the original 6 Fox-owned and operated stations. Alright, in episode 35 coming up real soon, we'll take a look at WGN TV. Which began as an independent station, in fact had 3 runs as an independent, now is a de facto owned and operated station of the CW. And they have a pretty lengthy history, so make sure you join me for the history of WGN TV coming up in episode number 35. Like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Ring the bell and get notified every time I go live. This is Big Al signing off. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in episode 35 of Television Station History. Peace out.